What's the difference between Japanese and Chinese pu'er? In this video, we're going to find out. We'll be comparing a ripe pu'er tea with the Nadeshiko Rose, a rare Japanese fermented tea. Later on, we'll explore why this is known as the rosé of teas. Before we get started, it's important to say that to be considered a pu'er tea, it needs to meet a few requirements. First off, it needs to come from Yunnan province in China, and it needs to be from the large-leafed Dayezhong variety. So not all fermented teas are pu'er tea. Pu'er just happens to be the most famous type of post-fermented tea. Post-fermented tea, or dark tea, is considered to be one of the 6 major tea types, a group that also includes white tea, yellow tea, green tea, oolong tea, and black tea. While most Japanese teas are of the green tea variety, there are a few rare instances of Japanese tea farmers producing black teas, oolong teas, and post-fermented teas like this one, the Nadeshiko Rose. This tea is made using a similar process as miso, soy sauce, and sake. The leaves are gathered up, sterilized, and seeded with koji in order to control the fermentation process. The leaves are then placed into a pressurized container where they are fermented. This is not too different from the process used to make Chinese ripe pu'er tea. The original pu'er, known as raw pu'er, was fermented naturally as it was pressed into cakes and transported long distances throughout China. As recently as 1972, producers came up with a method to create an accelerated fermentation process using the woduoi, or wet piling method. Tea leaves are piled up, sprayed with water, and fermented in a warm, humid environment to accelerate the fermentation process. This produces a much earthier flavor, with notes of dark rum, minerals, and earth. Both of these teas are made using controlled fermentation, so I thought it would be fun to compare them. First, let's take a look at the leaves. You'll notice they look pretty similar, with the Nadeshiko Rose being slightly lighter in color. The ripe pu'er has a clump of leaves stuck together, indicating that it was once pressed into a cake. So let's go ahead and brew these teas up. I'll be using near boiling water for the ripe pu'er and a lower temperature of 70 degrees Celsius or 160 degrees Fahrenheit for the Nadeshiko. It's customary to give ripe pu'er a quick 5-second rinse before brewing it, so I just set this aside and then rebrewed the tea using the same water. I'll let each tea brew for 1 minute and then pour them out. When we compare the color, you'll notice the ripe pu'er is much darker. The Nadeshiko takes on a more orange color, but this tea is known to have a pinkish glow to it when you hold it up to the light. This is one of the reasons why it's known as the rosé of tea. The other reason we'll talk about later. So when we compare the first brewing of the two teas, there's a very big difference in taste. The Nadeshiko Rose is sweeter, creamier, and fruitier, with a distinct note of strawberry. This unique strawberry taste characteristic is the other reason the Nadeshiko is known as the rosé of tea. Compared to a typical ripe pu'er, the tea has more acidity and less earthiness. The ripe pu'er is strong and bold, with a slightly tannic characteristic of wood and an earthy mineral finish. There's a hint of vanilla and even root beer in the finish, which makes this an equally complex infusion. Neither of these teas will release their full flavor in the first brewing, so I wanted to at least infuse them one more time. I'll be using the same temperature and amount of water, but a shorter brewing time of 40 seconds. Normally the ripe pu'er would be brewed for much shorter than this, but I wanted to keep the comparison fair, so I'm using a slightly longer brewing time. You'll notice both teas became darker in the second infusion, with the ripe pu'er bordering on coffee black and the Nadeshiko taking on more of a grapefruit color. The ripe pu'er started to lean more into this woody characteristic in the second brewing, and I picked up a hint of anise in the finish. Overall, it has less of this malty or chocolatey flavor the first brewing had, but it is darker and more earthy overall. The Nadeshiko, on the other hand, starts to lean more into this roasted, slightly spicy flavor profile. It picks up hints of char and a hint of cinnamon. I noticed a honeyed sweetness in the first brewing that still remains in the second brewing, but it's less pronounced. The first brewing of the Nadeshiko is really incredible. With a smooth, honey-sweet flavor and a pronounced strawberry tasting note, it almost tasted like a juice. The ripe pu'er, on the other hand, is equally interesting, but it may be more of an acquired taste. The earthy taste characteristic may be off-putting at first, but seasoned pu'er drinkers can't get enough of this unique flavor. Just make sure you go for a high-quality ripe pu'er, otherwise it can taste a bit fishy, literally. Anyways, thank you all so much for watching this tasting. I hope you enjoyed it. If you want to pick up the Nadeshiko Rose, you can find it on our website, neoteas.com, and get free worldwide shipping.